Hey, this is Seth Parnell, the minister at the Portia Church of Christ, and it's so good to have you here for another edition of the Midweek Bible Study. This is episode 45, and so we appreciate you being here, and we hope that you are staying safe. I know here it's really icy here in Portia. It's like a winter wonderland if you go outside, and so I hope if you're traveling anywhere, if you're on the road, I hope you stay safe because the roads, especially on the smaller roads, they can be pretty slick. And so I hope you know that if you're watching this on the replay, or if you're watching this live with us tonight, that we appreciate your presence, and we hope that everything is going well for you. We always want to extend an invitation if you are in the Portia area to visit us and to worship with us sometime. Right now, we are meeting at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock on Sunday morning for Bible class and worship, and we're meeting at 6 o'clock on Wednesday night for our midweek Bible study. And so if you're in the area, and if there's no dangerous weather in the area, of course that would cause us to postpone. But I hope that you can come and come see us sometime. Come worship with us. We are located at 307 South Jackson Street in Portia, Arkansas. And so if you're in the area, I hope that you can come see us sometime. We also want to let you know that you are welcome to participate in the study. You can submit questions. You can put comments. We want you to study with us, to be here with us, and to put your point of view. And as we always say at the end, if you ever need more explanation, or if you need further thought on some of the things that we say, then please feel free to get in contact with us. We would love to talk with you, and love to just to study the Word of God with you, because that's what we want to do here tonight. We want to study the Word of God. We want to gain a better understanding of how we can use our faith in this world, and just be someone who lives that Christian life. And so, hope everything is going well for you. Hope that you're having a good night tonight on this Thursday night. Tonight we have not just one, but we have two special guests with us tonight. We have Dakota and Anna Crossno. They are here with us, and they are going to be studying with us. I know if you remember, one of the first guests that we had on this show was Dakota, and so if you remember him, if you've been watching the show for a while, you remember him, and so I know that you will. Enjoy their perspective and their study, and so we appreciate them taking time to come back and to study with us. And so, Dakota and Anna, why don't you just kind of introduce yourself and tell us what you've been up to?
You want to go first?
I'm Anna Crossno, Mrs. Crossno. I have been studying. Here recently, I'm going to speak to some young ladies at a youth rally, and I think my topic will be over the modern day feminism and how homemaker, home life, a stay-at-home mom, those kinds of things aren't really looked at as, wow, that's so cool. And we see that in the home, I feel like, especially in the church. And we have problems with the older generation not taking in the younger generation and teaching us things that we need to know. So I'm going to encourage the young ladies about that.
She's also really good at cooking tacos and all that stuff. You need to know that about her too. Well, anyway, I'm Dakota. I guess you guys know a little bit about me because I've been on here before, but a couple things I've been studying in some of my classes. Right now I'm going over trying to think of the name of the class, Christian education in the church. So basically it's putting together classes and things like that, and how we should be emphasizing classes. And also I am currently studying through the Thessalonian letters, well, probably better known as the Macedonian letters, 1st, 2nd Thessalonians, and Philippians. So those are some little things I'm going over. But other than that, I guess you guys know enough about me. Seth does, so.
Yeah, well, I went to school with both of them, and both of you guys down at Crowley's Ridge, and so we're we're thankful for you guys being here. I know they're getting some good lessons. They're going to get a good lesson at that youth rally, and so we're thankful for you guys being here tonight.
Yeah, thanks.
We
Thanks for
we
having
have
us.
we have a couple of people who have chimed in here. It says they're watching. We got Nadine Mayland. She's my across the street neighbor. It's good to have you here tonight. And we've got Cheryl Herring. She is here with us as well. Hope that you're doing well tonight. We appreciate your presence, your virtual presence here tonight. Well, for our study tonight, we know that upcoming this Sunday is Valentine's Day. It's a day in which we typically it's highlighted of bring to mind your relationships and things of that sort. And we usually people think of more about in that line of those things during that time. And so tonight we're going to take a look at a Christian's approach to relationships and is our faith, is it something that matters when we take a look at the way that we approach our relationships? We know that the Bible talks about a lot of different things. It's a guide not just for spiritual things, but really for life itself. There's so much wisdom that we can get from looking in the scriptures and looking at the Word of God. It's something that touches pretty much every area of life. And so tonight we're going to look at some examples of relationships and maybe some characteristics that make for a good relationship for a Christian. And as always, if you have something to say, please feel free to put it down in the comments, because we would love to hear from you. But Dakota, we can start with you. What is some of your first thoughts when you think about a Christian's approach to relationships and how that fits into the modern Christian life? What are some things that come to your mind?
Well, I would think the very first thing I would think of, and this is something I need to work on personally, is humility. I think going into a relationship, Anna and I have only been married for 3 years, but we've been together for 6. But, one thing that I've caught myself doing that I need to work on continuously is being humble and not putting yourself before somebody else. And I feel like I've gotten a lot better at that since we've been married. But that's something that you have whenever you go into a relationship, especially as a Christian. You need to go into it with the mind of Christ, that this person is going to be above you. You put them above yourself at all times.
I think that definitely has a big role in it, as far as humility, and there was the word selflessness. I think that goes into a large part into relationships. But Anna, what is some of your first thoughts when you think about a Christian and relationships? Just kind of a maybe like an overview picture when we talk about how that fits into a Christian's life.
The first thing I think of when I think of Christian marriage is my parents and my dad. My parents had 5 children, and 4 of us are girls. So there were 5 women in the house, and one thing that he was really, really good at is patience. Mm-hmm. And so I always think of patience, in a house with 5 women who are all vocal with their opinions and everything. So patience is one thing that I think of. And that I try, emphasis on try, to be patient.
Me too.
Patience is there's certain parts, like there's certain characteristics that are highlighted in different situations. We know that patience is something that is good, in a lot of situations. If you're even if you're just dealing with a friend, or if you're dealing with other people, patience is important. But I think like in a relationship setting, I think it's especially important, and that's there's probably experience to back that up.
Mm-hmm.
But if we look at this, from the picture, of the, kind of look at it through the lens, of our faith, is relationship something that really is it something that the Bible is concerned about? Is it something that gives us, kind of a instruction on? Is is the way that we interact in our relationships, is it something that impacts our faith? Is it something that affects our faith? Or is it something that a person should maybe should look out for their own? But does our faith, does that play a part in our pursuit of relationships as people?
Definitely, I think so. I think when it comes to the Bible's concern with relationships, I would say that that's probably the majority of the Bible. Even in the Old Testament, when God gave the 10 Commandments, only 4 of those commandments were concerning Him. You'll have no other gods before me, and things of that nature. You'll have no false gods. But the last 6, that deals with our relationship with one another. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not covet your neighbor's wife, things of that nature. Even in the New Testament, the greatest commandment is to love God with all of your being, I'm summarizing. And then the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. And that's one of the biggest things with the Bible. And even whenever it comes to the letters of Paul, letters of Peter, and everything else in Scripture, it's all directed towards our relationships with God, of course, but more than that, I think, our relationships with people. I think one thing that John points out, I believe in... phone is dying, so Anna's going to plug our phone in. Sorry, our phone's about to die. But one thing that John points out in 1 John is that, if somebody says that they love God, but they hate their neighbor, that person's a liar. So the Bible is very, very concerned with relationships. And when it comes to like marital relationships and things of that nature, oh yeah, definitely. Peter hits on it. Jesus hits on it. So many others hit on it. It's very important to a Christian way of life, our relationships, not only with our spouses, but with each other.
I think that's very, very true. It's something that we've said on this show many times, and I've repeated it in Bible classes. You can't. It's hard. You can't really be a Christian by yourself, because so much of, like you said, of the instructions that we've been given, of the way in which we express our faith, has to do with other people and how we interact with other people. We're told to be kind, to be gentle, to be loving. Those are things that require other people in order to do. In order to Matthew chapter 22, what does it say? What is the second greatest command? To love your neighbor as yourself. Who is your neighbor? Jesus answers that specific question with a parable. And so it's a lot of what we do as Christians should be concerning other people. It should affect really the way that we treat other people. If it doesn't, I think that there may be a problem with that. But it's definitely something that we need to realize. The outreach that our faith should have. But Anna, from your perspective, what do you think that a person's kind of the same question? Do you think that a person's faith is something that impacts their view of relationships, and is that something that where we can go to the Bible for instruction?
Yeah, especially since Dakota grew up in a household that wasn't based around faith or Christianity. He had different ideas of what relationships were, as opposed to my ideas that were different, because I did grow up in a Christian faith-based family. So I think it does play a big part, especially in the marriage, and sometimes with relationships with your friends as well, but especially in your marriage. So those are things that a lot of people don't think about, but they come up.
Yeah, and I guess it does a lot, people from different backgrounds can define things in different ways, sometimes, and that can that can go along with what we said before, with that patience, and everything, and being patient with someone maybe while they're working through that. But
Yeah.
I think sometimes, at least in when I think about this, sometimes I think people are a little bit hesitant to kind of put their faith in their relationships, because if you start putting your faith in your view of like how you interact with other people and your relationships, that gets very personal. That gets very very personal to you. It's hard to keep your faith at arm's length when you let it affect your life in such a significant way. But yet,
Yeah.
That's what we're called to do. As Christians, we're not called to keep our faith at a distance to where we can switch it on and off. But I think Paul describes it as being a new creature, as being a new man. We are someone that has put on the faith that Christ has given us, and is heading in an entirely new direction. And so I think if it goes down, you really have to have a personal faith in order for it to kind of in order to affect you in that manner. And that's something that I think that shows up a lot in what we see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Whenever I did a couple of premarital counseling sessions with some couples surprisingly younger than me. But one thing I brought up, and I asked them, I was like, do you guys have a similar faith? Have you guys talked about each other's faith? And one couple said no. I said, okay, well, this is a discussion that you guys need to have before you get married, because believe it or not, it will come up, especially if you're planning on having children. And if you don't agree on that, that's going to create a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got to be dealt with. Like you said, a lot of people want to keep that faith at arm's length, but like a lot of things, it's going to come back and it's going to bite you, and it's going to bite hard.
Yeah, and it can be, I've heard stories, as you probably have heard, as well, of how this is something that can, put like a sense of division, inside of a family, as far as, how they're raised, and I've heard, you've heard stories of people who go to, two different churches, as don't really go as a family, but go separately. And so that can be a negative thing that we look at with our relationships. But with talking about that, what are some we've mentioned some before already, and I think there's many others that we could go over. But what are some characteristics and maybe some good qualities that we can emphasize, that we can try to incorporate in our interactions with other people, that can improve these relationships, that can kind of lend them to a more biblical way of having of having these relationships. That might be an odd way to put it, but in order to improve these relationships in a way that is consistent with our faith, what are some good qualities, good characteristics that we can have that can improve that?
In our relationships with other people or with each other? Like with friends?
We can start with each other.
Okay. Well, one of my characteristics that I try to work on would probably be understanding. I think a specific way, and it's hard for me when other people don't want to do things the way I want them done. So one thing that I try to work on, and that can go with marriage or friends or even family, siblings, things like that. Just because it's not being done your way doesn't mean it's the wrong way. And so I think understanding which would go with patience, maybe taking a step back, looking at the situation. That's one thing I've had to work on.
A lot because of me, but I would say, and this might piggyback off of hers a little bit, but I would say forgiveness. That's something that I think that I struggled with for a very long time, still do, as a non-perfect human being. But especially when it comes to relationships, you know, especially if you watch like any kind of secular TV show about like a family, you notice that the husband or the wife will bring up something that happened like, 5 years ago, and we'll throw it in the other person's face, and that happened all this time ago, but it still makes them angry. And you can't have that in a relationship, especially in a marriage, because if she brought up every little thing that I've ever done that made her mad, and if I ever brought up anything that she's done that's made me mad, our relationship would be horrible.
Yeah, but then again, we say that with only being married for 3 years.
Right.
So who knows?
Right. Knock on wood that everything continues to go good. But, I think forgiveness is a very important quality in a relationship, that you can't bring up the past. If God is willing to forget our sins, according to Hebrews chapter 10, then we should be willing to forget the other person's sins.
Yeah. And that's with every relationship.
Right.
I think that's very, that's very good, and I think that goes a lot into it. I think you might have heard the phrase before, or the quote, if all you do is keep score, then nobody wins.
Yeah.
A lot of times in sports, if you're playing football, I know we just had the Super Bowl, last week. The team with the high score, at the end of time, they win the game. But in a relationship, it doesn't work like that, and it's something that, like you said, it takes forgiveness, and a forgiveness that is more than just maybe just apologizing, but involves like you said, being willing to put that in the past and move forward. That's a big part of it. But the one thing that you mentioned before about understanding, I actually have a verse that Peter talks about in 1 Peter. He mentions this in his instructions for marriage and wives. He says, likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. He talks about how living in an understanding way, being someone who is willing to maybe see things from another person's perspective, maybe see things from another point of view. And I think something involves, like we mentioned, humility. We mentioned, selflessness, earlier on. I think that goes into this idea of understanding and trying not to make a relationship about yourself and about maybe what you get out of it or what you want, but trying to build up another person, and trying to, even though you may not completely understand it, but yet how to support them, how to be there for them. And I think that's a big part in a relationship when we take a look at it. And like you said, Jesus, Peter, Paul, they all talk about these relationships and give instruction on it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm glad you brought up this verse, because it jogged a memory of mine. I did a class over this, and actually had a class over this as well. And at Freed, the very first verse of chapter 3 is something I love, because we, as I think Americans and as English readers, we miss out on this, and sometimes willingly. But one thing I like about chapter 3 of 1 Peter, starting in verse 1, it says, "Likewise, wives, be submissive to your own husbands, so that even if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives." But then we go down to verse 7, likewise, husbands. You know, it's saying likewise to wives because previously Peter is talking about the example Christ set. You know, wives, do this. Then it goes down and says husbands, likewise. So you apply everything above to the husband. And that's another quality that, you know, you kind of brought on. I think it's teamwork. You know, I think that, everyone has their role in the home. But if the husband's not submissive to the wife in some aspects and the wife submissive to the husband in some aspects, nothing's going to mesh together correctly. Paul says that, you know, we do not own our bodies anymore. And that's true. You know, and that's what this whole idea of submitting to one another. And it kind of goes with that teamwork. And the husband and wife are supposed to be a team and are supposed to get things done together. And that's, I think we'll talk more about that here in a little bit with the other questions that you provided for us.
Yeah, I have something on that as well. But yeah, teamwork, you know, it's kind of thing like, especially when you're in the idea of marriage, you know, like it's you know, the passage in I can't think of the exact passage, but in Genesis, you know, it talks about how they, you know, basically you become, you know, you become that team, you know, you become, you know, one. And so now it's not just about, you know, the individual, but it's about you as well. And if you can, you know, work together, and I think there's examples of this as we'll see in scriptures about a husband and wife, you know, team who work together and could do some great things. But it's definitely there's an element of teamwork in that as well. And you know, I would also say, you know, that there's many other, you know, qualities that you could include. You know, you could talk about, you know, being gentle. You know, the scriptures talk about not dealing harshly, you know, with your spouse, but doing it with a spirit, you know, of gentleness. You know, we know about kindness and about, you know, about support. And there's a lot of you know, positive qualities that we can do in order to improve, you know, our relationships, and especially what you mentioned earlier, talking about the kind of being on the same page, you know, spiritually, and as with your faith. I think that's, if you're someone that is, you know, maybe, you know, looking for someone, you know, to maybe to date, or someone to get in a relationship with, you know, that's something that is a quality that, you know, you should definitely, you know, look for. You know, do you agree, you know, on those things, on which is, you know, probably some of the most important, you know, things that we can have, you know, on this earth, you know, which is, you know, our faith, and which in dealing our relationship, you know, with God. You know, is this relationship going to improve, you know, our standing with God, or is it going to push us, you know, further away? You know, I think those are questions that we need to ask, you know, about our relationships and how that affects, you know, how that affects our faith.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
But this is well, we can talk about, you know, the positive, and we can talk about, you know, the how we can improve. But this may, and we may have already mentioned a few already. This may be a short one, but what are some consequences, some negative effects that we can have if we neglect our faith, you know, in our relationships and in how we deal with other people? Is you know, what are maybe some negative effects that can occur from kind of compartmentalizing our faith and moving it off, you know, somewhere else?
A sour attitude. Not putting attention where it needs to be put. Rather, you then put your attention towards things that aren't biblical or faith-based. If you're not in the Word and you don't care about your marriage and things like that, then why would you put any effort towards that relationship? So as long as you work on your relationship with God and you put an effort towards that, in the Bible, it will also show you need to put an effort towards your marriage, towards your relationship with your parents, family, things like that. So
it's that triangle.
Yeah.
God at the top, husband and wife at the bottom. Closer you get to God, the closer you get to each other. Good
Yeah.
point. Some consequences of neglecting your faith. If I may, I'm going to use an example rather. I know a non-Christian couple, on and off a lot. Well, I say non-Christian. They have faith. They have a faith. One of them is been baptized. I don't know about the other one. I'm not sure. But one thing that I notice that comes up is they've been neglecting their faith, and because of that, they lose love for each other a lot. And whenever you start to neglect your faith and you start to kind of fall away from that, the Bible and what the Bible says, what God says, becomes less important. So if I'm neglecting my faith and I'm just kind of wandering away from God, what he says about our relationship doesn't matter as much to me. And with this couple I'm referring to, there's a lot of cheating going on. There's a lot of splitting up and trying to mend things back together, but it doesn't work. And the reason why is because there is no faith. The faith has been neglected. It's been abandoned, just about. But the consequences of neglecting your faith, they can be devastating. They destroy your relationship completely.
Well, something so simple as going to church. I know so many families, they go to church, go to church, go to church, and then they stop. Well, going to church is not just something for you and your faith, especially if you're a family or you're married. It's for you and your husband. It's for you and your children. It's for you and your church family.
Mm-hmm.
So when you stop, where's that time being spent? Is it being spent with your children instead? Probably not. Is it being spent with you and your spouse? Probably not. So you're losing that quality time.
Yeah, it can be almost like a distraction. It can be something that, like you said, that puts your focus in different places, puts your focus in other places. And I think we've said before, when talking about like going to church or attending an assembly, it's more about just being there, but it's your presence there affects other people. It affects the faith of other people, and people oftentimes lose sight of that, and they lose sight of the impact that they have on assembly, and they think it's just a personal thing. But there is, especially the relationship of people can affect, like said, like attending an assembly or being there, or maybe going to I know now in our current environment we don't have too many extra activities or fellowship activities with the church, but sometimes it can affect those as well. But it's definitely something I think that if we look at the Bible and the instructions that it gives us, even if you take salvation out of the picture, which I'm glad, so glad that it's there, because it's the hope that we have. But even if you take it out of there, if we live the Christian life, it's going to make us a very good person. It's going to make us a model citizen, a great person. I think that stands for relationships as well. If we live our life according to the standard that God sets, I think that's a recipe for a great relationship. But
absolutely,
I think if we, like I said, if we neglect those things, then, like you said, the consequences can be there, and sometimes they can be quite damaging to our to the entirety of our faith. But just as we have one more person chime in here, Donna Harris. She just says hello. It's good to have you
hey,
here.
Donna.
I hope that you are doing well as well. Hope that you haven't been iced in. But like we said, there's a lot of examples that we can find in the scriptures about about couples and about people who are in relationships. I think there's a lot. If you just look at the examples of characters that we read in the Bible, I think that we can learn a lot from what these people did and from what they experienced. But and when you think of relationships in the Bible, and what are some examples that you think of, and some people, some individuals that we can look at, and maybe we can learn some good things. We can learn some good things from. What are some good examples that we find in the Bible? We can start with Anna here.
Well, one thing I was going to say is one couple that always pops up into my head is Abraham and Sarah, and not for a good reason, not necessarily for a bad reason, but it's a point to show that every relationship has its up and downs, even if they are a great couple of faith and great faith-based people, they can still have problems in their marriage. And I'm talking about when it just bugs me so bad when Abraham, what was her name?
Hagar?
Went with Hagar because they were not patient with God.
Ancient surrogacy.
Whatever you want to call it. I don't like it. And so these two questions that you had us answer, that's just what it made me think of was.
She looked at both of them for both answers.
Yeah.
Abraham and Sarah came up on both. I thought that was funny.
I like them. I don't like them.
Gets mad at Abraham. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point to make. I was jokingly going to say, Solomon and his 1,000 wives.
Yeah.
Great example of faith-based relationship. One relationship that we see a lot, more positives, and I think we only see positives from this, is Aquila and Priscilla.
Mm-hmm.
You always get mixed up with Ananias and Sapphira.
Which we do have something about them that we're going to say. But Aquila and Priscilla, when we see them, this kind of goes with what we just talked about a moment ago with that teamwork, is when you see one of them, you always see the other. I mean, if you read in the Bible, how often do you see Aquila or Priscilla by themselves? I mean, somebody may correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never seen it. It's always Aquila and Priscilla. They work together in their faith to improve the faith of a man named Apollos, who would go on to, be the right-hand man of an apostle just about. He worked heavily with the Corinthian church. But Aquila and Priscilla, fantastic example of what a Christian marriage should be, is that they were involved together in their faith, and they did everything that they needed to do together. And that's something a lot of people miss out on today, I think. And they serve as an excellent example that it's not about needing my own space. It's about togetherness. You do things together as one flesh, as you referred to earlier.
And then with joking with Ananias and Sapphira, they were together in on that little lie that they told the church.
That's what I was kind of hoping that you would ask the negative one first, because it's kind of hard to say that they had a bad relationship because they were together in on it. They worked together. It didn't work out well.
That is true.
Bad decision, absolutely. But the fact of the matter is that they were, and if you want to have them as an example, they were one. They were one on their decision.
Yeah, and I think we may think alike, because I had both of those down as well. If you take a look at Acts chapter 18 and verse 26, we find here it says, when Priscilla and Aquila heard him preaching boldly in the synagogue, talking about Apollos, who they heard, it says they took him aside and explained the way of God even more accurately. And like you said, it was this, togetherness. It was this kind of this evangelism, this, helping people out in any way that they could, and they did this, together. Like you said, and we don't see the individual there much, but they're always operating, as that team. And you don't have to, you don't have to be someone who is a preacher or someone who goes off and does these great and marvelous things. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just you just talk to someone, and maybe like they did, they explained to this man more, says the way of God more accurately. And Apollos is described as a man with amazing potential. He's described as someone who is very eloquent, someone who is very intelligent, probably well educated, and he could do a lot for the kingdom of God. But still, there were some things that he needed to work out. And Aquila and Priscilla, they came in and they did this. And one thing that I always appreciate about them is when they take him aside. It says that they didn't just stand up and beat him over the head and say, you're wrong, you need to fix this. It says that they took him aside, they kind of took him in private, and they explained the way of God more accurately. And I think that's always a great example to follow, especially when you're dealing with conflict, and when you're dealing with a situation where maybe tensions could get high. It's good to just take someone aside and talk to them one-on-one, like Priscilla and Aquila did here. And I think they serve as a great example of a positive example that we have. But this is definitely there's definitely a lot of good ones. I thought of course if you take a look at people like David, he's someone that you can take a positive and probably a negative from as well, and what he did. I thought of there's what's his name, Hannah and Elkanah. They were two people who had they supported one another, and they loved one another, even though they had to deal with some pretty hard circumstances. But it panned out in the end, which is a happy ending to that story. But they were two people who we don't get a whole lot of information about, but it seems like they were good people. You take a look at Moses, and I think it's Sapphira, and then you take a look at Abraham, and of course Isaac and Jacob. We have a lot of information about them and their wives, and so there's a lot of examples that we could take a look at that have good things to learn from. But we can also switch the side and take a look at some negative examples as well. And so, in your mind, what are some things that some bad examples that we can take a look at as far as things to avoid maybe in our own relationships? We can start with you, Dakota. What are some bad examples that we can look at in the scriptures?
Well, actually, you mentioned one I was going to use in a negative sense. I was going to refer to Jacob and Rachel. Now, we normally think of them in a very positive light, but if you look at their relationship, it was a pretty negative one. They look like a good couple, and you're really rooting for them in the story in Genesis, because, this is the woman that he lifted this heavy stone for. We normally think of Jacob as this wimpy guy, but he lifts this heavy stone and weeps when he kisses her, and your mind goes to, I want these people together, and you think, what's his name? Laban, I think it is, rips him off and gives him Leah, and he's got to work even harder for Rachel. But whenever they're married finally, what's the first thing she does? Well, she steals from her father and lies about it. She fights with her sister and gets in the way of her and Jacob's relationship, which he should have been honoring her more than Rachel. But because of her, it's all separate, it's all messed up. And if you look at the meaning of her kids' names, it's very selfish. Their relationship was a very selfish one. Joseph's name means simply give me another. And if you look at Leah's kids' names, they all mean something in reference to her love for Jacob and her love for God. Jacob and Rachel's relationship wasn't one of admiration. It was one that you can look at and you can see the selfishness in this. Maybe they were selfish together, but they left God out. They left God out when it came to their relationship, and it was very much focused on each other, which could be good. But when you leave God out, it ruins everything. And I guess we know the ending to their story. Jacob does end up realizing his love for Leah and is buried next to her rather than Rachel. But anyway.
Well, that's with Abraham and Sarah. They took God out of it, and they were like, well, I'm just going to go lay with her to get my kid. Well, now you got issues.
Yeah, now you have a whole different people that are against the people of God. Yeah. And I think you're probably going to reference it, but David and Bathsheba? Is it? Yeah, David and Bathsheba. And that caused so many issues. And even a loss of a life, simply because of lust. I mean, there's several, and I'm sure you're going to bring up some, but there's several relationships that are very negatively impactful in the scriptures, and we can definitely take those and we can look at those and say, maybe I shouldn't be rooting for Jacob and Rachel. Maybe I should be rooting for Leah because she truly loves her husband and loves God and is not out for her own reputation.
Or maybe I need to reflect on my own selfish wants and needs and readjust those.
Put my partner before myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think those are some good examples, and I think we can agree that especially with people like Bathsheba and Leah, they're very sympathetic characters, and in my mind, it seems like they got the the bad end of the deal as far as how things started out for them, but we know like Bathsheba became a queen of Israel, but I don't think she really asked for that, but that was something that came because of the lust of David, and so that relationship started out in a very negative way, and I think we always need to make sure we know we have our priorities, or maybe we need to start our relationships in the right way, and we need to make sure that our motivations for staying in a relationship are in the right place. And like you said, that they're not selfish, that they're not something that is centered on just something temporary, but they need to be in the right place, and something that kind of sets the tone for something that will last, something that can have that commitment that we find in a lot of those good examples that we find. But one of the ones that I thought of that we mentioned earlier is that you were talking about is Ananias and Sapphira, and like you said, they were on the same page. That wasn't the problem with them, but in this time it was almost a negative thing, because they came up with an idea that was a very bad idea, and instead of checking each other and saying, well, this isn't good, this isn't a good idea, we should probably back out of this, they went in with each other and they went ahead with this plot. I think I have it here in Acts chapter 5 and verses 1 and 2. It says, but a man named Ananias, with the consent of his wife Sapphira, sold a piece of property. With his wife's knowledge, he kept back some of the proceeds and brought only a part and laid it at the apostles' feet. And we know, like from the end of the story of these individuals, they end up lying to the apostles, lying to the Holy Spirit, and that had dire consequences for them, and dire consequences that 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 cost them their life. And so I think one of the, even though this is a negative example, there's still things that we can learn from them. And I think in a relationship, you need to have a sense of trust. You need to have a sense of that person is looking out for you, so that when you do have a bad idea, when you do come up with something that you should probably turn away from, you have someone that's there to to keep you accountable, someone there to tell you that you trust, that you can tell you that this is not going to work, and that you need to do something different. We need to have those people that can tell us when we're wrong, and because that can be a hard thing to take to hear, but if it's coming from someone that you trust, someone that has your best interest in heart, then that can make it a little bit easier. And so we kind of need those checks and balances in our life, because I know not all of my ideas are good, not all of the things I do are good, and so it's good to have people to kind of check that and to make sure that you're on the right path.
Absolutely. While we were going over this, Anna pointed out a couple that it is a bad example, but a good example at the same time. This is one of our favorite Bible events in someone's life. Haggai and Gomer.
Hosea.
Is it Hosea?
Yeah.
Hosea and Gomer.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah,
Hosea and Gomer. On Hosea's part, it's a great example. He loves his wife and is willing to do anything for her. But on her part, it's a very negative one, because all she wants to do is run around on him. But at the end of the book, something that we love about it is that he sees her on that auction block and stuff, and he gives everything just to buy her back and bring her back home. And obviously it's an example of God's love for us as his people,
and how man should love his wife.
And how man should love his wife. Absolutely. To that point we talked about earlier, that forgiveness, that mercy, there's nothing greater than that. But you can see a lot of negatives and a lot of positives in relationships in the Bible, and I think that's one of them, like Abraham and Sarah, that has very good and very bad examples for us.
Yeah, like you said, there's going to be ups and downs, just like any character in the Bible. There's times where they shine and times where they don't look as flattering. But that's part of the goodness of the Bible, is it gives us real people, real characters that they're not really characters, but the real history of what happened, and it gives us their good things and their faults. And like you said, relationships happen in that same way. And what you said reminds me of a verse that we find in Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 25, where he says, "Husband, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her." If you take a look at the love that Christ has, the love that Jesus has, for the church, that there's a lot of things that you could just get from that, and what that love looks like. And if you incorporate that into your relationship, it's as Ephesians 5 says, that's something that's gonna take a lot of effort. It's gonna take a lot of work, as all good things do, but it's something that has its benefits. It has its good things, and so it's something that we of course are called to do.
Absolutely.
But we've been going here for about 55 minutes, and so we're going to begin to wind down and to kind of close down on this, taking a look at this topic of Christian relationships. But do either of you guys have any closing thoughts as we kind of wrap this up, and of looking about this intersection between a Christian and his relationships?
Well, one thing I would like to say is, if any young wives are going to listen or are listening, you asked if we had any podcasts we listen to, and one that I listen to is called The Homemaker Chic. And a lot of things they talk about is doing the hard things, and it's pretty Christian based. But one of the hard things they do is they wake up before their family wakes up, and they go to bed after their family has already gone to bed, which is found in Proverbs. Proverbs 31:15, she rises while it is still night outside. And then on to verse, let's see, where is it? A few verses after that, her lamp does not go out at night in verse 18. She's working into the night to provide and help for her family. And that's one thing that, I want to have the church do, is connect the old with the young, teach the young wives things they need to do for their family. And it's not being done. So we're having to find other revenues of that aside from our own moms as examples. And one is the Homemaker Chic podcast, and of course the Bible. And
I think that's something, especially myself included, that we don't appreciate. I think it's Christian men with our wives, is that they sacrifice a lot, and it's kind of hard to see sometimes, because as guys we're in our own heads, but it comes into that putting somebody before yourself. There's excellent examples of women that do that today. And I think that's something that we need to appreciate, especially as a younger generation, because our generation just doesn't see that. But we need to look at that, and we need to understand that this is a big part in Christian relationships. The husband as the provider, the wife as the caretaker, and the husband and the wife, the father and the mother as the team. And I think that's something that we need to realize in our relationship with one another today.
That sounds great. Absolutely. We so appreciate you guys being here tonight, and thankful that you took the time in order to study with us. If somebody wants to get more in contact with you, or more in contact with the Leachville Church of Christ, how can they do that?
Well, we have a Facebook page.
Leachville Church of Christ.
Leachville Church of Christ. Yes, we do go live Sundays.
Sunday night.
Sunday morning and Sunday night. Sunday morning at 10:30, and Sunday night at around 6. We'll have interactive classes. Right now, we're going over the Corinthian letters.
That sounds good. It sounds good. And so we want to reiterate, what we said, earlier. If you have any questions or comments, about what we said tonight, then please feel free to get in contact with us. We'd love to talk to you. We have a couple more who have said hello. Tommy Robinson has said that he is watching, and Donna Harris says thank you, Anna, for your comments, and I will share this lesson. And so,
that's so cool.
you guys are well appreciated. We thank you. It sounds like you're doing well over there at Leachville, and so we hope that you have continue to do well as we kind of navigate these uncertain years as far as the everything that is going on. But we wanted to invite you back. If you're someone that is viewing this maybe for the first time, or if you're a continuous viewer, we are here every Thursday night at 7:00 for another edition of the midweek Bible study. But until then, we hope that you have a wonderful week, and we will see you here next time. And we hope that you have a wonderful day. I hope you go out and be the light of the world, and be someone who lives your faith out in a big and powerful way.